All right. So once you finish those other kind of preparatory steps, you're kind of on to the last bit. There's multiple ways to do this. There's the like kind of the ship editor, data editor that's built into the game. There's the ship template tool uh, that Yevgenes made for us, and then there's the way I do it, which is sort of a hybrid way. But what I'll do is I'll find a similar ship, just like a escort for maybe for another faction. It's all set up. Make sure you change the race ID to whatever you're using. Um, the That's kind of what determines what race it's available to, not what package you use. So potentially you could put human ships into the Xenox bundle, and as long as the race ID is correct in here, it'll show up correctly. But the way I do it is I'll edit it directly in the XML, and then I'll use the ship data editor to kind of validate it. Basically, I'll save this one bit here as an XML and open it in the data editor to make sure everything shows up fine. Um, the most kind of important thing you want to do is the ship ID. If this is not a unique number, the game will crash and it won't give you a error message um, that is obvious that this is the problem. So you want to look in whatever you're looking in. This is Shiphulls art. It's sort of where we add in ships as artists, so it's not the final one, but the Shiphulls is in the same place. It's just in whatever the directory is, data, and then you have Shiphulls and then Shiphulls art. I don't know if Shiphulls art is going to be remain for the release. I'm guessing it's not, as it's just kind of for artists testing. But anyway, just make sure that number is unique, like I said. Usually the best way is just go to the end of the document and look at this number and just increment it by one, and then you're good to go. But this is just the escort how I have it set up, so I'm not going to change anything in here. Most of this stuff you can kind of ignore. I mean, obviously there's the size, which is the internal size, like as in the stuff for modules and stuff like that. Maximum size is as big as the hull can kind of support. Display size is the actual size what it looks like in game. So if you make a model and it looks a little bit too big in game, instead of shrinking the model in your 3D package and going through the re-import cycle all over again, you can just edit this number here. The model name, this is how it's set up in Zenko, or excuse me, Stride. It renamed partway through the project. But if you right-click the mesh and go to copy URL, asset URL, it'll give you this that kind of directory. Most of this stuff is going to be automatically filled out by the tool Yevgenis made, but I'm just going over it for completeness sake. All this other stuff is I'm not super familiar with it, as it's not anything I've had to touch. Engine limit. This is just you want this to be -1, just so there's no engine limit. And this is kind of how the component bays go here. Now, it doesn't matter which order you have these in. It's just the way we've done it is just weapons first, then engines. As you can see, sensors, defense meshes, and then eventually into just the normal general components where you put in stuff like reactors and that sort of thing. That's the non-visible meshes. As far as weapons go, the kind of the most important part there is the weapon size. As you see over to the right here, I have a little bit of a cheat sheet. A heavy weapon is 120, medium is 39, and a light weapon is 19. If this is 19, you'll never see a heavy weapon in the slot. It'll just never show up. You have to have the right sized component for it to trigger the larger sized meshes. There is no medium mesh. I think this is just for like a in-game sort of situation. But it's still important if you want medium weapons to have that on there. The next bit is the firing arc range. So this is in radians, and it's radians diameter, which is a little confusing, but essentially 360 degrees is pi radians. It's 2 pi radians, I believe. But it's since it's just radius, you want half of that. So it's just 3.14, a little cheat sheet again, just with some common rotations here and their arcs, and that just how wide of the firing arc you want, as opposed to its direction, which is set in the mesh. These rescale factors here, you can make the meshes bigger or smaller. 0 is just the default kind of mesh size. We don't really mess around with that for weapons. It's mostly an engine thing. So I guess this wouldn't change the mesh size. It would change the bullet sizes. And the projectiles, whatever actually comes out of the weapons, it would make them bigger. I'm assuming. I've never actually messed with that. But if we scroll down here to some engines, you could see a rescale factor. Since the engines are kind of rectangular, I had to mess around with this to get it to look right on the nozzle. So as you can tell, the Y value is smaller than the X value because it is a rectangle, and that sort of squeezes and widens the engine trail so it fits the nozzle better. By default, it's a perfectly round engine trail. So if you have engines that where that doesn't work, you'll have to mess with the scaling, and it's kind of about iterating. You could change it here, open it again to see how it's gone, and go back in here. There's probably a way to figure it out manually, but I haven't quite gotten there. So this is one of the rear engines, but if we scroll down a little bit more, so this is one of those side engines that was pointed at an angle off the pylons. So the scaling is a little bit different with these because the angle sort of skews the bounding box, which changes the rescaling a little bit. So if you notice here, it's only 0.4, and that's a 1 instead of a 7. And then the offset, this actually moves the source of the engine trail, like where it's generated. And since it is at an angle, the center of the bounding box has moved slightly towards the pylon, like I said. So we'll have to scoot the source over a little bit to compensate for that. And that's really all that needs to be said for this. Once this is done and saved, and everything's to your liking, we can check and see what it looks like in game.